The Holocene has ended. What we do now and in the next few years will profoundly affect the next few thousand years. The only conditions modern humans have ever known so far are changing, and changing fast.
We are smack dab in the middle of a global scale, civilization level collapse. Now, if we do our job right, it will be a transition to something else. I would like to express my personal thanks to President Donald James Trump. No, I'm serious, because the 2016 election did more to shake good people from the dogmatic slumber than any event that I'm aware of. Yeah, it's actually been a very big deal. I've felt a significant increase in energy, a significant increase in a willingness to accept the fact that the best way to describe our current circumstances is that shit is fucked up.
The world built on top of our defining mythology falls apart, as our ecosystems fall apart, as our political system, as our educational system, healthcare system falls apart. Things aren't working so well anymore, and it's a lot harder to fully believe in our stories.
The shift that we are on the precipice of is not like the shift from the Dark Ages to the Enlightenment, or even the agricultural revolution. It's like more like a shift from single cell to multicellular life. It's like a really deep fundamental shift in the level and type of complexity in the nature of reality that we're talking about.
Understanding of what's real and what's possible and who we are. And in that new story, that logic of the heart that says, yeah, I know that this is a significant act, and I know that everything I do is significant, no longer contradicts the logic of the mind, which had been the logic of separation.
And so then we get to we have the possibility of moving from being parts of the whole that are competing with each other, but moving to having power that makes that no longer possible, to actually being agents for the whole. I think this next shift is us realizing that as technology that results from our abstraction, but focused on parts and not focused on how the whole thing fits together. As technology is kind of giving us the power of gods, we have to get the love and wisdom and understanding of gods, or we self-terminate with that power. That's a big task. I don't think that we can say that anything smaller than that could possibly be adequate.
I mean, even if Donald Trump took ayahuasca and had an experience of oneness with nature and saw the living heart of nature and so on and so forth, what would he do with that?
He still has to please voters.
Yeah, I mean, and what about his cabinet, and what about Congress, and what about the CIA, and like all of these, and if he says anything of this, people are going to think he's crazy. And so he's like, well, I'll keep this knowledge secret and I'll do what I can. And aren't we all kind of in that same situation? I think everybody on some level carries a buried secret. The secret being, the world doesn't have to be this way.
Yeah, it's like we're all engaged in this very elaborate pretense, and we all kind of know that it's a game. It's not, we're just playing it, we're characters, but that's not who we are.
Yeah, it's a very, for some people, a very deeply buried knowledge and a lonely knowledge. And that's why it's so gratifying when you hear something or read something that speaks what you've been whispering to yourself for a long time. Yeah. And that's how deep the change has to go. The change has to go that deep. That's what the environmental crisis is posing us with. It's not going to be solved by, replacing coal plants with wind turbines and petroleum with biofuels. Like, that is not a deep enough revolution. Not a matter of sustainability in terms of how do we sustain what we already have. That would be comfortable, to just switch fuels and keep everything going. And then we have to ask, is this what we want? Like
From a standpoint of the probabilities, it's like a branching stream of probabilities. And there are actions that we can take that affect those probabilities, or that accelerate one thing or slow down another thing, introduce something new to the probability stream.
It would be that. Like, we've got the tools, now we have to use them, and there's not a moment to spare.
I mean, I am concerned about certain directions that AI could take that would be not good for the future. I think it'd be fair to say that like not all AI futures are benign, not all.
Okay.
And so if you have something, if we create some digital superintelligence that exceeds us in every way by a lot, it's very important that that be benign.
As far as saying that would be like my only hope for a kind of glorious revolution versus a bloody reign of terror. If we can simply, if the people and the ideas and then the actions can just do an end run around the established balances of power, and again, Bernie would be an example. Like, what is a true progressive centrist?
What would you say people should do, George, if they do one thing?
I mean, what we have to do is the big structural political economic stuff. What we're being told to do is change your cotton buds and all these sort of pathetic micro-consumerist bollocks, which just isn't going to get us anywhere. Actually, everything we have to do is change the system. We have to overthrow this system, which is eating the planet with perpetual growth. I mean, since when was GDP a sensible measure of human welfare? And yet everything that governments want to do is to try to boost GDP. Now, people like the OECD or the World Bank who say, oh, we're not asking for a lot of growth, just 3% a year. That means doubling in 24 years. Yeah, we're bursting through all the environmental boundaries and screwing the planet already. You want to double it? Double all that? Double it again? Keep doubling it? It's madness. We've got to find a better way of measuring human welfare than perpetual growth. We've got to, there's time, but we can't do it by just pissing around at the margins of the problem. We've got to go straight to the heart of capitalism and overthrow it.
Hey, there has been for all of creation a cat and mouse game between the priests and the Prometheans, right? And there's always the people trying to bring light to humanity. And there's always the forces of dark looking to control it or shut it down. It has ever been thus, right? From ancient Greece through MK Ultra, right? And CIA projects. And even, we said, hey, our worst enemies are weaponization, commercialization, and hedonization, right? Our own worst impulses. So it can either be taken over by state or non-state actors, or it can be co-opted to sell us more shit, or we put it in the ditch all by ourselves. And these are structural dynamics, then they should behave according to the persistent historical pattern of it always starts out utopian and it's going to change the world, and it always ends up hegemonic and centrally controlled. So unless we want that to happen, folks, the only solution that we think is possible is to open source the tools for self-realization, community connection, and healing ahead of all the efforts to co-opt it for darker ends and be a bunch of, this is the Rebel Alliance. Like, that's the only hope we have, is if we can publish the plans for the Death Star, right? And the tools for our own liberations.